let them quickly introduce themselves before I introduce myself, and then we'll get started. So let's start with Michelle.
Thanks, Mark. So Michelle Stansberry. I run Little Penguin Public Relations, based here in San Diego, but working with clients all over the United States to get them traditional media exposure. So earned media placements in TV, newspapers, magazines, and online publications.
Wonderful. Scott?
I'm Scott Bailey. I operate the Sandler franchise in Orange County, California, or Irvine specifically. I work with companies with B2B sales forces of typically 3 to 10 salespeople across all industries. People come to us because they're frustrated that there's no common sales language or playbook. They're upset that the salespeople are cutting prices to close deals, and they're concerned that they're losing market share. So they come to us to solve those issues. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'm Mark Fidelman. I've got a marketing agency in Los Angeles and San Diego. I've got people spread out across the U.S. My focus is primarily on using video and influencers to drive sales and revenue. And can't wait to dive in and hear from Michelle and Scott about what their strategies are. So why don't we get started? Let's cover the agenda real quick. We are going to go through our purpose. We just went through the introduction. Then I'm going to talk about marketing and some new opportunities that I've seen during the pandemic, and I'm studying this left and right. I've got videos I'm posting on LinkedIn about it if you want to check that out. Sales from Scott and PR from Michelle. I'm very interested to hear a sales perspective on this and a PR perspective. And then closing out with other COVID-19 resources that you can use, and then some closing actions and a lot in between. So let's jump into our first topic of today, the purpose. Okay. So in reality, this is something that none of us have experienced before. I mean, unless you're around during World War II, right? And what do you do in this type of environment? I mean, who would have predicted this? Who's got the playbook for this? Nobody handed me a playbook. When this happened, 5-6 weeks ago, who, raise your hand, received a playbook on how to deal with this situation? So today we just want to be kind of collaborative, and feel free to kind of raise your hand, post comments in the chat section. If you have any questions or suggestions, I'm still learning from this. I'm just observing and then trying to connect dots and connect people in order to make things happen. But we're really looking at primarily a marketing, PR, and sales approach. But then again, that might move into services and in product depending how this goes today. So with that, let's move on to the next. All right. So let's talk about how small businesses, and I assume everybody on here is in a small business, how to market and sell yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Okay. So help small business owners navigate the new COVID-19 reality, how to market and sell in COVID-19. So let's start with Scott on this. I believe, Scott, is this your slide?
Is not my slide, no.
Okay. All right, can we go to the next slide? Okay, marketing. All right, next. All right. So I like this quote: where there are problems, there's opportunity. And there are quite a few companies out there that have really grown and have expanded and were built during a recession. And here are just a few: Dropbox, WordStream, Zendesk. Believe it or not, these were all born in a very recessionary environment around 2007, 2008. So the point here is, if you look at the current landscape, while it might look bleak to you, there is going to be plenty of opportunity. I mean, think what, business is going to be like even 3 months from now, 6 months from now. I think personally, the ramifications of this are going to be more video-based, look at Zoom as a prime example of how many people are on Zoom. They're going to be working from home more. The people, in fact, I think e-commerce has been fast forwarded by 5 years. If you think about it, all the people that were resisting buying things online, or maybe they bought a few things online, they're not buying them now, or weren't buying them up until 6 weeks ago. They're buying them now, right? I mean, think about it. Your father, your grandpa, whoever it is that was resisting it is now forced to do it. So the fact that e-commerce has been fast forwarded by 5 years, your business should align to that. Because if you're not selling online, or maybe you can't sell online, and I understand that, but you have to think about these new realities that are coming up: home-based delivery, more people using video, more people at home working, e-commerce. All of those things are opportunities. And there will be some companies, this will be a new logo list in 5 years. There will be some new companies that are emerging out of this. And these are just the big ones. There's plenty of small ones as well that grew out of this recession and became very successful. So that's kind of where I'm looking to focus today, is what are those opportunities? And I have some examples on the next slide. So how to win, I titled this How to Win During a Pandemic. And what I'm seeing people do, and these are business owners I work with or I talk to, is they're asking their current customer base, because that's where you want to start. What is it? How can we serve you? It's essentially what the questions are around. And maybe they throw out ideas and examples and, hey, what if we did this or that? And a lot of what ifs, and rate this on a scale of 1 to 10. And then they pick a couple that are the easiest to implement, and then they execute on it. And these companies, it didn't take, a year. These are things they executed in weeks, obviously. I mean, if you look at one of my favorite examples is, okay, you've got an escape room. I mean, no one's allowed to come visit and go to your escape room, right? There's not anyone that can go out. As far as I know, maybe there's places in the United States that are still open to this, but you can't go to an escape room. So what they decided to do is they said, we're going to make an escape mail. So what does that mean? Well, you can't go to the escape room, but we'll send you out something in the mail that are puzzles and escape room-like activities that you can do at home. And it became so successful, and this is within weeks again, became so successful, they're now offering a subscription service, and it's extremely popular. They're making more money from that than they were from the escape room. And the escape room's not scalable, the mail service is. So there's one idea that was born out of it. Another one I loved is Keep Seattle Smiling. So there was this local company that sold local products, and they decided, hey, let's go around to all the other local establishments and create a Seattle box. So it's all local Seattle mom and pop shops that they now aggregate into a box, and they sell this as a subscription. So here's a physical retailer that didn't have an online presence, or maybe they had an online presence, but nothing like this, not a subscription box, and put this together in a matter of weeks. Very creative, and a pivot that's going to turn out to be successful, and probably a new business that they're going to start as a result. And lastly, I don't know if you've seen this, but on Airbnb now, on Airbnb, you can book homes, you can book events. I didn't even know you could do events, but you could do events, or experiences, what I think they call it. Now there are online experiences. So if you have an amateur magician, a magic act, or you're a good singer, or you're just entertaining, you can charge anything from $1 to $1,000 to have some kind of a video experience. Maybe you're a chef and you want to teach people how to cook. They have these online experiences that you can go register for and do online and make money. So those are just 3 examples. I've got hundreds, and I'm publishing them to my LinkedIn channel for you to look at and kind of model after if it makes sense for you. The point is, how do we become more creative? And then looking down the line, how do we skate to where the puck is going, to quote great Wayne Gretzky? How do we how do we figure out what's going to be, what this pandemic is going to change for us, and it will change us. And then how do you take advantage of it now and position yourself best for now without running out of money? So I know that's a key concern, especially for people on this call, and I want to be sensitive to that. But if you could be creative and you could pivot and you could start looking forward as to where the market's heading, you might be one of those companies that emerges stronger and with a better business model. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I'm now going to turn it over to Michelle for her take and her view on public relations. Michelle, it's all you.
Oh, great timing. I just called back in on my phone. Can everyone see and hear me all right?
We can, yes.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to be talking about public relations during the pandemic. So if you want to flip to the first slide. All right. So first, a part of any good PR strategy is really thinking about the overall marketing and communication strategy. Because a lot of times I'll get clients that call me and say, well, we've instituted new policies during the pandemic. We've shut down our offices and we're now by appointment only, or, we're sanitizing things and wearing face masks. Let's put out a press release. And I have to say, hold on a minute, because those are all very important steps. What you're doing is very important and you should be communicating that. But you shouldn't necessarily be communicating that to the news unless it's certain situations. You have to think about all the other aspects of communication. Your email list of opt-in subscribers, the people who are already connected to you via social media, maybe even one-on-one emails with your employees, your board of directors. So thinking of that overall communication plan is essential first, to then think about what elements are great for PR and what elements are going to be the most beneficial in other different types of communication elements. So then once you figured out which ones are important for PR, you have to think about, what really makes this newsworthy? What messages are appropriate, not just to share with your general audience, but to share with the media, because it's important to be broadcast to a wider audience. And some of that is really being critical on what those messages are. There's a lot of people out there that can talk on a lot of different topics. So why is it that you should be talking on a particular topic versus somebody else? For example, the situation I just gave where someone's shutting down their office, wearing face masks, things that are pretty much in line with what a lot of other businesses are doing. It's still a great step. It should still be communicated, but not necessarily to the media. Whereas if somebody's doing something that's very novel in their community, that's something that you should then think about, okay, this is something we should put together a media alert about this, or reach out to reporters or editors. When you're also thinking about a PR strategy, you have to consider now that you can't do as many in-person interviews, what other virtual resources do you have? Hopefully you've already had a bit of a media kit that has either B-roll video or photos. But if you don't, this is a great time to collect that. Because again, if reporters aren't able to send a photographer on site or a videographer on site, to have those resources can really help you get into the media during this time. So gathering those together is a great step when you're starting to pitch out anything related to the pandemic. If you don't have any pandemic-related PR opportunities, that's okay. Not every business is going to have something that's related to the current crisis. And that's just fine. There's still so much work you can do getting ahead on PR for your evergreen content, for upcoming future product announcements. PR, I find, is one of those things, maybe like reorganizing your kitchen cupboards, that people always put off to when I have time. Oh, when I have time, I'm going to put together that media kit. When I have time, I'm going to, write that that ebook or those scholarly articles. This is that time. If you're not an essential business and your business isn't changing dramatically right now, and has in fact slowed down, that's okay. And you can take this time to get ahead on other PR opportunities. Next slide. Okay, so you've created your PR strategy, you figured out what you're going to be communicating, you've pulled together your resources. The next step, and I can't stress this enough, is to listen before you speak. So before you start pitching your business, your product, you as an expert out, you really need to be listening to what the media is reporting, who's reporting on what, and how they're reporting it. If you don't necessarily subscribe to newspapers or usually watch, TV on cable, this is a great time to start to see what people are talking about. I have to stay tuned in every day to make sure that I know, because I'm waiting for this shift of when reporters are going to be ready to start talking about different things. And so to keep your eye on that pulse is really important because everything's changing right now, which brings us to the second point of staying tuned in. Reporters are now taking on all sorts of new responsibility and roles because everything is changing so quickly. I just was talking to the watchdog reporter at the Union Tribune in San Diego, the investigative reporter, who's now handling their COVID live blog. So nothing to do with investigative reporting, but just like paying attention and figuring out what reporters, what editors, what journalists, what producers are now covering what is going to be really important. Certain news stations are sending crews on site because they have boom mics that they can do in-person interviews with social distancing. Some are only doing virtual. And just paying attention to those things means that you can pitch your news and yourself most appropriately. And then more than ever now, don't be afraid to ask questions. In general, it's best if you don't, in a non-pandemic time when things are very stable, it's better to do your research instead of asking reporters, what beats they're covering or how things are working. But right now, it's anybody's game and things are changing so quickly. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Because everyone's kind of scrambling right now. I mean, just in San Diego, we had 3 magazines shut down at the very beginning of the pandemic, and a lot of other changes for other media outlets here. So it's okay to ask, to say, hey, what stories are you working on next? Or, oh, I saw you covered this. Are you going to be doing more of that sort of coverage? How has your role changed? How can I be a good resource to you in this time? And by asking those questions now more than ever, you can set yourself up for success in PR.
Okay, I have a few questions, Michelle, if I may.
Please.
I am not a PR expert. I've done a lot of PR, but I'm not a PR expert like you. But I'm hearing from my clients that they've kind of given up on reaching out to reporters. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why would the reporters stop reporting? Or why would bloggers or anybody in the media stop reporting? And I'm wondering if you're hearing the same thing at this point.
It really depends on industry by industry. So, for example, if you're a medical device company who's come out with a new insulin pump, it's great news, it's really important, but all of the reporters and media and outlets that would normally be covering that sort of news, they are pretty distracted right now with new vaccines coming out and new testing protocols coming out. So in that case, absolutely, I can see why they would feel that it's futile right now. On the other hand, there's a vast majority of industries that it's really just about either making what they do, what they're trying to reach out to reporters, relevant to this current time, or it's about identifying the reporters who are looking for content that isn't as immediate. For example, when you're talking about print publications, print magazines that tend to run with a 3-month lead time, they're not running pandemic-related coverage because their next issue is coming out in 3 months from now. So those are great outlets to think of if you have something that's really timely but still very important to get out. So I would say it really depends on a case by case. And I encourage everyone watching and listening to send in those questions in the chat box, because I'd love to address some specific situations of how you can optimize any particular examples for PR right now.
So let's take the example of the insulin pump. Why couldn't they tie it into COVID somehow by stating, or at least positioning it to the journalist, well, you know, there's plenty of people that are struggling to get insulin. So if they were to use a pump and have insulin delivered, I don't know how insulin's delivered these days, but let's say it's home delivery. And so they're able to deliver that in a way that, you know, there's nobody touching anybody else or nobody in close proximity to somebody else. Isn't that tying the story into, you know, this pandemic and the social distancing somehow? Would that be an angle that you could see working?
If it's truly timely, absolutely. If that's really what that product is intended for, absolutely, that's fantastic.
Couldn't they spin it into that though? Wouldn't
Well,
that be a way?
I'd be careful with the word spin.
Well,
I
it's
would say,
PR.
right, but I think there are different types of spin, right? So for example, I've been waiting for a while for a launch of a client that I'm working with of a basically an online tool for fitness instructors. And they didn't create this for the pandemic, but it basically enables fitness coaches and trainers to continue to coach, but virtually at home. So that's a very obvious tie-in, right? Like that is very important right now, even though it wasn't necessarily created for the pandemic. But an insulin pump that is, you know, maybe has better readings than other insulin pumps out there, but is no more or less applicable to someone being at home. I'm not saying you won't get any coverage on that or get anyone to pick it up. All I'm saying is that you have to put yourself in the minds of a reporter, of an editor. And the reporters and editors who are covering medical advancements right now, they still have a certain amount of inches to fill. They still have a certain amount of stories to put out this week. And while that might have been a top story before the crisis happens, right now you have a lot more competition. You have a lot more announcements and products and news that maybe feel more urgent to that reporter or that editor than an insulin pump that's been in the works for 3 years and is a great advancement on the product, but it doesn't have a very strong tie-in to what's going on right now.
Okay. So I know of a scenario I'd like to run by you, if you don't mind. So this is kind of a series of unfortunate coincidences and events and bad luck. But so there's a nutrition company that sells nutrition products that moved from San Francisco, just recently from San Francisco down to LA. And so they don't have exposure to the LA market yet. Leased a very expensive building in downtown Los Angeles and signed the lease, and just weeks later, you know, the quarantine hit and everybody had to stay at home. Now, from my perspective, I think there's a story there that would tie into all this, you know, business tragedy story. It's actually not a tragedy. She's working on ways of pivoting, but how would you kind of position that scenario where she's still got to pay rent? She doesn't have contacts or customers yet because they were just moving in and getting the kitchen set up and all the products set up. Can you envision a situation or some kind of a scenario that you could position with potential local reporters or journalists or bloggers, what have you, that she could capitalize on?
Well, and part of that's going to have to do with strategy as well. So if the focus of the story that you're thinking of is kind of another, you know, business victim of the pandemic, that could definitely get some media coverage, but you have to ask yourself, is that the kind of coverage I really want to be getting for my business? And in some cases, that's absolutely yes. I have one client that does outsourced accounting and HR, and so they're talking about, you know, the small business loans that they're applying for to help them through this tough time, because they get that double-edged sword of they're experts in these accounting and HR processes and procedures and new programs, and they can have the personal spin of how they're using those to help them get through this tough time. So it can work. I just think it's about a strategy of saying, do you really want the PR coverage of your business? And this might be the first coverage that comes out of your business if it's new, to be about all of the hard times you've fallen on due to the pandemic. And even if so, you know, there's a lot of businesses that have been hit really hard from the pandemic. So not to say it wouldn't get coverage, but is that really what you want to focus your PR effort on right now? I would say instead, my recommendation based on, you know, only your 30 seconds of information would be wait until that pivot does happen. Perhaps she starts creating delivery boxes, you know, from her home that are immunity supports and can get some media attention around that, and those pivots that are positive and that can position her and her business in a really good light. Again, not knowing all the details, that would just be my initial.
Yeah. No, that's actually good advice. I mean, if you position it as a positive, hey, we're rising above this. Yes, we were hit hard by this like everybody else. Don't expect anyone to feel sorry for us, but here's how we're pivoting. I think that would be a good angle, and you should see some local reporters, journalists, even bloggers pick that up. That's good advice. Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, I think we should turn to sales at this point. And Scott, why don't you kick things off?
I'm happy to. Thank you, Mark. So can we go to the next slide? Okay. So what's changed because of COVID-19? Well, selling is still selling. The only difference is we might be doing it from a home now. We probably are doing it from home. Some of us aren't used to working at home, and we might have children at home. We might have various distractions at home. So I've kept to a routine. I have a particular work area that I use, and my laptop is upstairs in my loft. It's my new home office. And when I'm up here, I'm working. When I'm downstairs, I'm not. So I keep a separate zone. You need to get updated on how to use the tools of Zoom, if that happens to be your tool of choice for virtual. But the process does remain the same. One of the things that we at Sandler recommend people do is we want to look at something called the success triangle. So those of you who are able to write, you might want to take out a piece of paper and a pen and draw a triangle. And up at the top of the triangle, we would have our attitudes. What are our attitudes? Have they changed because of the situation we're in? We still want to maintain a positive attitude. Also up in the attitude, the top of the triangle is where our beliefs live. What are our beliefs about selling? Do we believe it's something that we can do? Do we believe that commerce is still happening? What we're hearing from our clients is, because we have an active training program, which is pivoted to, there's that word again, pivoted to virtual now. And we're hearing that it's actually easier now to get a hold of people than it was pre-COVID, because your targets may be home now. They are home, and their office line is now bouncing to their cell phone. So we're finding out that we're actually doubling and even tripling in some cases the amount of conversations that we're getting with people. We recommend that we always approach a sale as if we have, or a potential selling situation, as if we have the winning lottery ticket in our pocket. It's the beliefs that we carry with us. At the lower left corner of the triangle, we'd have our behaviors. This is what we call our cookbook. This is our recipe of behaviors that we do. An example would be with regard to selling, the number of outbound dials that you're making. You can control your behavior more easily than you can control your attitude. We may not be able to network face-to-face right now, but there's certainly lots of opportunities, as we're doing now, to virtually network. Commerce can still happen that way. You can conduct webinars such as this. You could be working on LinkedIn. And one of the things we're doing right now is working on cleaning up our database as we speak. And after this call, I'll be meeting with my marketing person, and we bought a new list of potential prospects that we'll be targeting as soon as all this lifts. So there's things that you can be doing. So watch what you're doing. Develop a cookbook, a recipe for success. Again, those are the actions you could take and be responsible for. And there's the techniques, sales tactics, like questioning strategies, like closing tactics, like asking for referrals, crafting a 30-second commercial, what you will say. You have to know what to say. If you're going to have an outbound calling program, it's important that you know what to say when you do get a hold of somebody. Do you or don't you leave voicemails? These kinds of things, you have to have a plan together. We recommend that clients make what we call, take your future, your past, and your present clients and put them into 4 categories. And these are the attributes that they share. While it's real normal and kind of typical to look at our prospects and clients in particular verticals, like size of companies, revenue, geography, niches, these kinds of things, we'd like you to look more at the attributes and take your clients that you want to keep. It's called the CARE program or CARE strategy. Decide the clients you want to keep. There may be some clients you want to lose during this, or you're happy to see them go. There's the clients that you want to keep. Do you have a strategy on how you could keep them? Do you know maybe they need some particular TLC? Maybe they need some kind of a special terms right now. They probably represent the balance of your business. You're happy to have them, they're profitable. Have you identified your ideal prospects that you want to attain? These are the ones that you're going to target and go after. And you can be doing that now. And you could be practicing in this environment. Maybe it's not perfect, but why not get the practice done now while you have the time to do it? And then we want you to take the clients that you had in the past that you want to recapture. These are ones that you were happy to do business with, but for whatever reason, they're not currently doing business with you. What do you have to lose by contacting these people now and seeing if you have an offering that they could use? And probably your greatest growth potential would be your expand clients. These are clients that you already have that may have a need for a particular product or service that you haven't sold them in the past. And these are the clients we say that you want to, quote unquote, tuck in at night. So it's real easy to do this. We're doing this program before the COVID situation. And we found that if we do this about every 3 months, and now there's not a better time than to do this CARE program than right now, and to probably do it again once the thing lifts, because we will see a dynamic shift in who we have and who we want to recapture. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, the Sandler selling system is going to work in an up or down economy. I've been doing this now for 26 years, and this is probably my 4th economic, what I would call recession, if you want to label it that, even though it's going to be temporary. And a system is going to work regardless of what the economy is. The first step of the system, at least ours, is to develop rapport and trust. And there's various ways to do that. The people who are listening probably have a ways to do that. We could look at their DISC profile, which is their behavioral style. Some of you are familiar with DISC. You sell to a high D differently than you would sell to a high I, for example, dominant versus influencer. I think it's best right now that you approach a prospecting situation, not trying to sell somebody something, but to spend an additional amount of time building trust and rapport at this point, not with the goal of trying to sell people things. Take control of the sales process at the very beginning. And we call this an upfront contract, which is have an adult agreement with your prospect as to what this call is about, how long it's going to take, and discuss the potential outcomes of the call. And there's no reason you can't do this virtually. And certainly we've always had the phones available to us. And again, that's called an upfront contract. It's the structure of the sale. Don't let the prospect take control. We want to maintain control. We want to get permission to ask questions, for example. It was mentioned before by Michelle that we want to be asking questions. And we find that if we get permission to ask questions, we can ask deeper and better questions, which is going to lead to the next step of the system, which is gaining a better understanding of your prospects. We call this of your prospects, it's not done in there. It's their, what we call their pain. What are the problems and issues your prospects are going through now? What are the What are the emotional things that they're doing? And do you have a solution? Try to get 3 to 5 of these things. Find out if they're truly motivated to buy from you. And that expands more into the pain. We teach a sequence of questions called a pain funnel, which opens up the prospect. Tell me more about that. How long has it been going on? These kinds of questions. Have you been able to identify a cause of these problems? Are you willing to fix it and see if you could be of help to that? Find out if your prospect has the budget. We find that the more pain we're able to uncover, it attracts money. Pain attracts money. If your prospects have true pain, they will figure out a way to find the money. Find out if their decision-making, what their decision-making process is. Find out if you're dealing with gatekeepers or decision makers and what we call the cast of characters, all those individuals involved in the buying process. So in the Sandler world, we call pain, budget, and decision the qualifying steps. Make sure that your prospects are qualified before you cross the line and deliver your solution to them, because it's no good to just become unpaid consultants, especially in this time and environment. So when the prospect is qualified, that's when we make the presentation, the proposal, and then we want to make sure that we could lock it down with any potential buyer's remorse and ask for referral. So that's essentially what we're doing, and I hope this is helpful to everybody as we go through this situation together. I hope you all stay healthy and take certainly as you're working, take time for breaks, go out and walk, get some sunshine, get some fresh air. That's very important as well as part of your behavior plan. So, thank you.
All right, Scott, a few questions.
Sure.
A couple from me, first of all. So there's been this debate, and I think it's subsided a little bit, but there's been this debate on selling, right? Is it okay for people to sell their products and services right now?
Well, let me put it this way. It's always unethical to sell somebody something they don't need, but it's also unethical to not sell somebody something that they do need. People still have needs. And there's this negative connotation with around the term selling. When I was a little boy, I didn't want to be a salesperson. Nobody has a career goal to want to be a salesperson, but I'll make the case that we're all selling at some point in our time. You ever been on a job interview or on a date? You're in a selling situation. So we believe that selling is a noble profession, an occupation, and that without sales, nothing happens. There's no commerce. And selling is the only activity that brings in revenue for all of us.
Yeah, very well so. And I think just to add on to that, I think the tone has to change, but we can't stop selling.
Absolutely.
I mean, the economy is already, tanking. And I think the last report was 20 million people are out of work only in the last few weeks.
22 million is what I heard. Yeah, it's devastating. I mean, but this doesn't relieve you. I mean, you should be call the people that used to do business with you and see what they're doing. You may find, and I've had this happen, just reaching out to people, because in the training world, there's a finite time that people don't become clients anymore. At some point, they reach what I call training fatigue, and they stop training because they kind of get it. But I'm reaching out and I'm calling these clients that haven't done business with us in 5 years, 10 years even, checking on them, and we're getting business. We're getting business in this economy. And the excuse that people were using before was, we don't have time for training. That's what we used to hear. And I call up and say, what excuse do you have now?
Yeah.
Right?
There's no.
Now's the time to get ready. In all these areas we're talking about, this is the time to get ready. Your competitors are running scared. Their heads are pulled in. So we understand that this is a temporary situation. We can't control it. What we can control is what we do. We can only control what we do.
Yeah.
Our behaviors.
Thanks. Very well said, Scott. I have a couple of questions. One is from Kimberly Santera, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. Is there a reference you can give us for the CARE strategy?
A reference. If you will send me your email, I will send you a document on, it's actually part of the Sandler Enterprise Selling Program. It's one of the tools. I'll send you the instructions on how to put together your own CARE situation, your attributes. I'm happy to do that. And if you'd like a free half an hour virtual consultation on how to put together, I'm happy to do that for anybody who's listening. No problem. But I'll need your email address. I'll get the documents over to all of you.
Kimberly, if you'd put that in the notes or chat, we'd appreciate it. Next question is from Polkeet Agrawal. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I apologize. What is the best way for B2B SaaS companies to have an empathetic approach to sales? They run a company doing sales to breweries, but are treading cautiously as the restaurant and brewery industry is being hit hard, really hard.
Well, we're all being hit hard.
Yeah.
You know, maybe virtual training companies are not being hit hard. But when you say empathetic, I mean, we should have that before this is going on, and reach out and find out and be sincere about it. Don't have an ulterior motive. Call people with a sincere agenda, if you will, of finding out how they're doing and make sure that that comes across. Don't try to sell somebody something. Not everybody's in a position to buy right now. This doesn't mean we shouldn't reach out to them, because the business is taking place right now. I can assure you, commerce is going on right now, although it doesn't feel it, it's happening.
Is this a time to offer a discount or to offer a longer extended trial? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's time to try things you haven't tried in the past. Sandler has a program, it's a technique. It's called a monkey's paw or monkey's fist. It's selling somebody something small that could lead to a larger sale, getting your foot in the door, make it easy to turn them from a prospect to a client as fast as you can. And then we do the land and expand. Once they become a target, we want to keep them, and then we find out if we could expand it, right? So get your foot in the door. I'm not a big advocate of discounting, especially training. When we teach sales training, why would I discount it? Because we try to teach people how not to do that. But be creative, offer some other types of products that maybe you could charge a small amount of money for a consultation that would lead to a larger sale on the back end. Get a commitment from somebody. Don't just discount it. I mean, find out what their pain is and address it. That's my advice.
One of the things I see Zappos doing, and I know it's B2C, not B2B, but they basically posted, hey, we don't care what you want or what your problems are. Give us a call and we'll walk through them with you. I mean, they're acting as therapists. I mean, this is a shoe company, and they're saying, and they did this before, if you've read the CEO's book, but now they're just, hey, if you want to talk about the lack of sports on TV, give us a call and we'll commiserate with you. And it's interesting. And I'm not saying do that, everyone's equipped to do that, but maybe in your industry, there might be something that you can model that after. Okay, so moving on, another question from Eloisa Alvarez, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly. How many times should we reach directly to our customers on a standby situation? And I assume she means when you're in this situation right now, how often what's the right amount of times to reach out to them, let's say during the week?
Is that question directed to me?
It is, Scott, yes.
Well, my active clients, I talk to them every week because we train them every week. We have a weekly program on Mondays, and when I don't hear from them, I'm calling them. I'm concerned about them, and I'm generally concerned about them. Hey, I noticed you weren't on the call on Monday. What happened? Did you forget? Well, if something came up. So every week with my existing clients, that's what we do. And that's not a bad idea as a general rule. And then the people that I'm targeting, I'm reaching out to them, once a month. And I'm not just calling them, I'm reaching out to them with email. I'm going on LinkedIn. I'm trying to, dig through the people they know, trying to get my, knocking on the door. If I can't get in the front door, I'm going to try to get in the side door, upper window. So it just depends on who you're prospecting. Prospect as much as you can until you hear the word no. It's okay. Don't be afraid to get a no. Push till you get a no. That's what we recommend.
And Scott, she revised the question a little bit to be current clients that have canceled for the moment, or at least put their engagement on hold.
Boy, that's a great question. I've had one cancellation. One of my clients is in the background screening industry. You can imagine that industry is dead right now. It was a great client. We're training them monthly. And actually, after they canceled, they reached back out to me. So, we're currently not doing business, but I feel like we will be. I would say, to answer that question, I'd say maybe every 30 days, just reach in and check in with them to see, not again, if you could sell them anything, but just be genuine and sincere and authentic and find out truly how they're doing. You might be surprised what would happen. And if they're going to reach back out to you, that's great too. I mean, that's even better.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Scott, for answering those questions. Let's move to the next slide. Okay. So how to market, sell, and conduct PR during COVID-19. I think it's fair to say that, we've covered marketing, we've covered PR, and if you have any other questions on any of those, now would be the time to ask them. Some of the other questions that I've asked during sales, some of this has been covered, but let me break this down, and I encourage both Michelle and Scott to chime in on these. My first question is, my business model is broken. How much time capital should I invest in a pivot? What a great question. So I'm going to take a stab at this, and then I encourage Michelle and Scott to chime in where they disagree or agree with me or have a different perspective. It's all okay. So if your business model is broken, and I'd say at least in this current situation, 80% of people's business model is broken. How much time and capital should I invest in a pivot? So from my perspective, I want you to find a pivot that works. And you do that by surveying your customers, your top customers first, and then your ancillary customers. If you don't have their email addresses or you don't have a way of doing it, then you've got to extend that out via friends, family, what have you. It's not as reliable because unless they're spending money with you, to me, I discount their opinions. But I need to find out the pivot first before I spend any money or capital. And once I'm confident, even if I'm confident in a pivot, I still want to test it. And so you set aside a certain amount of money to test it. And then if it's showing signs of success, then you start doubling and tripling down on that investment. But the key is take the time, a week, 2 weeks, to really get your hypothesis down, test it. If it works, then scale. That's what I would suggest on that. Scott or Michelle?
I think that's great advice. And in my particular case, I've pivoted into virtual training, and that we were already 60% of our clients were already being trained virtually. So now 100% are. And now I'm also investing time, not just money, in learning more about how to use Zoom and training techniques that, because that's what I do, that are used virtually. And I'm getting investing a couple hours a week in there's sources to learn how to do these virtual rooms effectively. So it's not just money, it's time.
Okay.
I'd probably just add in, it depends if the pivot is relevant kind of only during this pandemic crisis, or if it's a pivot that you think has that long-term potential. Mark, like you were saying, the future of work is different with more people are going to be working remotely, not just during shelter at home, but for the foreseeable future, there's going to be a dramatic shift versus something like lockdown liquor, which opened in San Diego once ABC loosened the restrictions of liquor, that we feel pretty sure is going to be a short-term loosening of restrictions. So I would say think about if the pivot is a short-term pivot or a long-term one to determine if you should put in just a little time and energy or a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's well said. Is it going to turn into a long-term opportunity for you, or is it short-term, like Michelle just suggested? That's a good addition to what I had recommended. Okay, let's go to question number 2. And this is loaded. What is the best platform for marketing? Well, there is. I mean, there are so many platforms out there, and it depends on if you're a B2C or B2B company. I mean, if you're B2C, you might think Amazon is the best platform for marketing your products because there's everything on there, including affiliates and influence and everything that you could possibly use. But they're taking a lot, and shipping, by the way, but they're taking a huge chunk of your profits. For B2B, I mean, there's hundreds. There's HubSpot, Salesforce, all sorts of marketing automation companies. There's just so much. I mean, if you were working with me, I take you through an exercise to figure it all out, and I get it at the most affordable prices. But it really comes down to, okay, what's your goals? How big of a company are you? How many people are you supporting? And then figuring out what the best system is to put in place in order to maximize your revenue at the end of the day.
I would add, Mark, that there's probably no bad platforms. There's just better ones. Pick one and get committed to it. We recently switched over from Salesforce to Infusionsoft after 20 years of being with Salesforce because of the simplicity of Infusionsoft. And plus my director of marketing's recommendation. I share a director of marketing with 10 other franchisees around the country. So we are able to get a best practices, what's working in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Orlando, Florida. Will that work here in Orange County? Probably will. So we're getting great results with Infusionsoft.
Yep.
It's a platform.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
I was just going to add in that the best platform for marketing, I would say, is one that you're actually going to use. I know some people, clients, what have you, that buy Salesforce and then just always need to input all of their data and contacts, and they just never use it. So I would say figure out what you're going to use, because if you're not using it, it doesn't do you much good.
Some expensive Rolodex. Salesforce is an expensive Rolodex.
Yeah, I mean, it's for bigger companies that really want to, need hundreds of salespeople and marketing people supporting.
Exactly.
I've seen companies run off of Google Drive, Google Docs and spreadsheets and all this, and they're doing just fine. It really depends on your business. So, that evaluation needs to take place because you could be like Scott spending a lot of money on Salesforce and maybe 1/10 on Infusionsoft. So
I would just say there's no bad marketing platforms, only bad marketers.
All right. So let's go to number 3. What's the best method to learn new customer needs? Now, I'll give my perspective. I do like getting out in the field and really understanding it myself. That's how I learn, as well as surveys. So when I cross-reference to surveys with actual customer feedback, I want to be on a phone call with them. It's like I'm doing an interview. I put on a reporter's hat and I interview them, and I make them feel like that I'm not representing the company at that point. I'm representing kind of this objective person, because you want to hear real feedback. You don't want them to hold back. Surveys are another great tool. And then just watching behavior. I mean, if you've got Google Analytics and you know how to use it, and you've got our other data analytic tools, and you just watch actual behavior based on what people are actually doing. There's programs where you can put on your website and you can watch where they click and you can watch where they go and move around. Those are fantastic if you want to learn how people are navigating your site.
I'm going to have to disagree with Mark.
Oh, good. We have a fight.
Good. So I don't believe in asking your customers what they need and listening to their responses and taking them at face value. I do completely agree in watching behavior. And I have a kind of a fun example, spice up the call a little bit. My first job out of college is I helped Abercrombie and Fitch start up a new brand. So lingerie brands, which is where the spice comes in. So the first thing that we did was we did focus groups. We did surveys, right? So we got a bunch of girls in the room who were our target audience, and we said, all right, what do you want in your lingerie? How do you shop for lingerie? What do you spend money on? And they gave us all of these answers. And one, just for example, was people like, oh yeah, we buy matching bras and panties. I told you it gets spicy. And so I was just like, that's really interesting. Because, just with the target audience. And so I was like, hey, do you mind if I interrupt focus group? And they're like, sure. And I was like, okay, who in here is currently wearing matching bras and panties? And everyone kind of like thought about it for a second. No one was. So what we ended up doing was doing shop-alongs. We give them a $200 gift card to another lingerie shop, watch them walk around, see what they picked up, what they actually bought, and learned so much more. I mean, they weren't intending to lie to us. People just don't really know what they want or need. So I would say watching is a really great way, watching the behavior, whether it's Google Analytics, or seeing what they do, or in PR, looking at what reporters are actually writing about versus what they say they want to write about. Anyway, that's my half disagreement with you, Mark.
There's, and surprisingly, I'm not going to disagree with you on this point. There's a famous quote that goes back 100 years from Henry Ford. And he said, if I would have asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse.
Right.
Now that's true. You can't always ask your customers what they need and want. Steve Jobs was very famous for saying this. But I would challenge back a little bit and just say, well, you could put those a bunch of options out there and see which one they would actually choose. So you come up with an idea and see what the one they actually choose. But I do agree, it's behavior that you have to watch. But if you're innovating and there's no other lingerie shop you can go to, how do you know what the next generation of lingerie is going to be, unless you put out some examples and see if people will buy it? And even then, people that say they won't buy it because of social pressures in the future might. So it's a really challenging situation. Scott, anything to add there?
I'm dead from the shoulders up. I'm thinking about lingerie right now.
Sorry, I knew that was going to be topical.
No, I will say that I am extremely happy that I have a franchise that is very, very good at being very proactive in what's next with our clients. In fact, I'm the one that has to catch up with what's going on at the home office right now. We have a CEO that is very much into vision right now. I'm extremely happy. I just got to execute it.
Okay.
So.
All right. So let's take the final question before we wrap things up. I have a new customer, product, or partner. What's the best PR to get the word out? I'm going to start with Michelle on this one.
I think maybe a better question would be what's the best marketing, sales / PR. But again, I would sort of go back and say, is it relevant to today? If it's not relevant to today, are those reporters writing about things that are more relevant to today? And if so, can you push back the announcement? It's funny, people are always calling me about PR timing. They're like, well, the new partner is joining in 3 weeks, so when do we need to announce it and start on the announcement? And I said, yes, your partner's starting in 3 weeks, but you do have a little flexibility with PR of when you announce it. You could announce it 2 months from now, and nobody's going to be shocked and appalled that you waited 2 months to announce something that happens, like a new partner coming on. Same with the product. A lot of people put products onto the marketplace and then announce it later once they've made sure there's no issues with the supply chain and distribution and customer feedback. Sometimes they'll announce it early. Sometimes they won't even have it out to customers yet, but the development is done, so they decide to announce it. So I'd say in terms of timing, be a little bit flexible right now because the media landscape is changing every day.
Yeah, I will only add to that, and I think I provided an example earlier. I think the best way to do this is to somehow position it into helping people during this pandemic. And if you can do that in a way that attracts the right media outlet, and you really have to study these journalists to see what they're writing about and what appeals to them, and stalk them on social media. Because a lot of them, have these hot buttons that they'll write about. And then, what I do, and again, I'm not a PR expert, but I stalk them and I like everything and I comment on everything for like a week. And then I just have a simple ask: Will you hear my client's story, or will you hear my story? And because you've paid it forward so many times, I'd say half the time they'll at least listen. So that's one way.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that a lot. There's a recent example of one of my nonprofit clients has a food pantry for veterans. And there's a certain news channel I just kept trying to get it into. And I started stalking the producer on social media. I realized he was a huge dog lover. Like every photo was him and his dog. I was like, oh, well, this pantry also does dog food for service animals. And so I sent him that. Within 30 seconds, he replied being like, yes, let's book it. So yes, getting to know reporters, reading what they write about and produce and put out there, but also, yeah, getting to know them a little bit personally is a great opportunity to create those targeted stories.
Great. Okay. Let's wrap things up. If we can go to the next slide. We just did questions and answers. All right. I wonder if we should have Kim come back on and talk about these free webinars. If she can't, I will go through them. Sadly, I won't be invited to these, but I can speak to them if Kim won't.
I don't know that Kim is on right now.
Oh, she's not on. Okay, well then I'm going to take it forward. All right. So next week is their winter boot camp, virtual pitch day event. And this is what Kim's doing is amazing. And I've known her for a long time. And I'm just so proud of what she's done and what she's doing and the amount of money she's raising to help companies. I think we should all support her. And I've always been a big fan of hers. And so next week, winter boot camp, virtual pitch day event. If you're looking to raise money or you want to raise money, this would be, the place to be, because I think what she's going to do, and I don't know, but this is what I'd be doing, is looking to help people, pivot their pitches into something that's more of a COVID-19 related situation. Even though this isn't going to last forever, I still think that's on the top of everyone's mind. So if you wanted some advice or help on doing that, this is probably the place for it. To register, you see the link down below, and reach out to Kim directly or anyone on her team if you've got any questions about it. Next slide. All right. I think we've covered the key actions. I'm trying to keep this under an hour, folks, but I think we've covered the key actions we recommend you take. This has been recorded, so you can always go back and watch it. Next slide. And I just want to thank you. I want you to know there are plenty of people in your situation, good or bad, and we're all in this. And we today, I think, provided you with some resources. There's quite a few people out there trying to help. I mean, I know of some people, if you're interested, that will help you through the whole SBA process, whether you need funds for PPP, whether you need loans, whatever it is, some advice. I know a guy that's just fantastic that can help you through that. So everyone take care. Let's hope this thing gets over relatively soon. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty tired of being locked in a house. And I just appreciate our panelists and appreciate you all for your questions and watching us today.
One of my clients said this past month has been the longest year of his life. You gotta have sense of humor, really.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Right?
Instead of the 4-hour week, we've got the 4-week hour, it seems.
And if anyone wants to connect after this, I put my email in the chat box. Happy to chat with you about any PR questions or how that might apply to you and your business. So feel free to reach out.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Everybody stay healthy.